Hello. Dan Lizdas, our church council president, and I are glad you joined us for this video. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, your council and staff have been focusing on two words. The first word, connections. Keeping people connected with God, with each other, and with the ministries of LCR. The second word, options. Providing meaningful and multiple choices for you to remain connected with the ministries we all love. In this video, Dan and I will share some thoughts about how we are living out those two words in the area of worship. Since the pandemic hit in March, we have continued to grow and expand our worship options. We started immediately with virtual worship, inviting you to join us online for worship each Sunday at 11 a.m. 9 weeks ago, we added parking lot worship, purchased an FM transmitter, and invited you to come to LCR and worship God in the safety of your cars. Last week, we added the option of lawn chair worship. You could come to LCR, sit outside your car in your lawn chair, and hear the service through a transistor radio. 3 different worship options, all of which will continue for the foreseeable future. Currently, we are worshiping around 120 people at our parking lot services and over 100 people during virtual worship on Sunday mornings. Recently, we have been spending a great deal of time talking about and preparing for the Advent Christmas seasons. In the past, we would expect 500 people to worship with us on Christmas Eve. And I had so hoped that we would be back in the sanctuary to welcome them again. But with social distancing protocols still in place, we can accommodate only 50 people at any worship service, making sanctuary worship this Christmas Eve too impractical and risky. Therefore, we have shifted our efforts and have developed very exciting plans for both outdoor and virtual worship this Christmas Eve. Trust me when I tell you that you will not soon forget those worship opportunities, whichever one you choose to attend. So when will sanctuary worship become practical and safe? By early in 2021? I don't know. What criteria will we use to make that decision? And what kind of worship experience can we expect when we do return to the sanctuary? Dan Lizdas is here to talk to us and to guide us through the criteria that we have been using and will continue to use. Dan, thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Dave, and hello, everyone. I hope that you're all doing well and staying safe and healthy. I'd like to take a few minutes to let you know how your council has been continuing to monitor the COVID situation to help inform LCR's plan for worship. First of all, the members of the executive team, which is made up of myself, Catherine Straight, Bob Rose, and Elizabeth Schreiner, have attended each of the 5 webinars that the Southeastern Synod has conducted for council presidents and council leaders. These webinars have been very helpful to understand what the Southeastern Synod COVID Task Force is recommending and learn what other congregations in the Synod are doing in response to COVID. One example of something that we learned from these Synod webinars was parking lot worship. Our learnings from our partner congregations in the Southeastern Synod have been instrumental to shape the parking lot worship that we've been offering since August. Second, we recently developed a set of criteria for LCR to use to help determine when we may be able to safely return to worship in the sanctuary. We developed this set of criteria based on learnings from the Southeastern Synod, and now I'll walk you through 3 slides to explain what the criteria are and how we plan to use them. These are criteria we reviewed during our council meeting this past Sunday, and the council was supportive of using them to evaluate our plans to return to worship in person in the sanctuary. So the first slide is a view of metrics that are used. The website is listed on the bottom, www.covidexitstrategy.org. This was a website. I would encourage you to take a look at it if you haven't yet. It was recommended by the epidemiologist that's on the Southeastern Synod COVID Task Force. And there are essentially 4 main criteria that this organization uses to evaluate an overall aggregate score. And they look at it by state. And kind of walking through, you can see on the upper left-hand side of the slide, they have color-coded from a green to a yellow to a red to a maroon color. The 4 metrics that we'll be evaluating, one is new cases per million per day. Another is percent of test target. So in other words, how much testing, COVID testing, is each state conducting. Another one is around ICU capacity, so how are our hospitals doing in response to COVID patients. And then the 4th one is percent test positive. So that's probably a very common one that most people are used to hearing and looking at those 4. So the way this organization, the covidexitstrategy.org, works is your overall aggregate score for a state is based on your weakest score, is the basic idea. So then moving on to the next slide, it's yet another organization that the Synod has recommended. The website is www.globalepidemics.org. This is just a view of their kind of color coding and metrics. They too also look at cases per day per 100,000, just a little different than the cases per day per million that the other website does. And what this site is very helpful because it tracks that metric down to the county level. So you can actually look, it's a global website, you can look around the world or within the US and you can look at the counties. So that'll be helpful to get a more targeted metric for our area here around LCR. And the last slide I'll walk you through kind of brings it all together as we plan to evaluate the criteria for how it pertains to LCR. And so first thing I'll say, it's a combination of some absolute numbers and trends. Throughout the pandemic, we've learned that the COVID is by no means predictable, and looking at like a single number in isolation is not very helpful. You really need to look at the trend to see if things are improving or deteriorating. So on the top part of the slide, you'll see 2 charts. On the left-hand side, it's the state of Georgia. On the right-hand side is the areas that we feel that we should be looking at. So Cobb, obvious from where LCR is located, Fulton County, DeKalb, and Cherokee, where most of our members are living and traveling around. That was another recommendation the Synod gave, is don't just look at your only your county, look at the counties around you, because obviously people are traveling around day to day. And so the upper left-hand side, you can kind of see the trend of what the state of Georgia did, and on the right for our 4-county area. And then on the next thing I'll note is on the lower left-hand side, you could see those are the actual metrics themselves, where the first one, new cases per day per million for the state of Georgia, and as well as our 4-county area. And you could see those are all in red. The test positive is more of a yellow. Those metrics down below we weren't able to get them by the county level, so we'll look at those at the state level. And then the last one I'll kind of point out is the trend that we'll also look at is the 14-day COVID positive trend. Really important to not just look at the numbers absolute, but just how they're doing. And as of yesterday, when I pulled these last night on October 18th, in the state of Georgia, we've been increasing about 8% over the past 14 days. So the overall assessment on the lower right of the slides, if you look at the trends and the numbers, although things were improving in August and September, things have not been doing as well, and they've been rising in October. And you could see the 2 categories that those 2 websites would conclude that Georgia is doing. So what are we looking for? You might say these are the metrics, the criteria that we would use to consider returning to in-person sanctuary worship. I think what we're looking for would be all metrics would be in that yellow category per the covidexitstrategy.org, and the 14-day positive trend for COVID would be going downward. So those would be what we would be looking at before we would consider returning to in-person sanctuary worship. As of today, we have 2 criteria we're not meeting. The new case per day per million is too high. We're looking for that to get below 80. It's right about 123 or 114 here in our area. And the 14-day trend of COVID positive is getting worse. So we will continue to monitor those. We thought it was important to let you know that what we'll be looking at, and I would encourage you to look at those as well. I'll also remind you that once we do decide to return to in-person worship, the safety protocols that we've outlined before will continue to be applied. Super important that we follow social distancing, maintain outside the sanctuary. Masks would be required for people 2 years of age and over. We will continue to provide those masks like we do today in the parking lot. Hand sanitizing stations will be located throughout the sanctuary and narthex, and we'll be doing appropriate cleaning of the sanctuary prior to each worship experience. And then, as we've said in the past, it's expected that if you're feeling sick, that you remain home and use worship during the virtual experience. And so one last thing I wanted to mention, in addition to continuing to providing options for ways to worship, we continue to look for ways to connect with each other. And to that end, we've evaluated the space in our pavilion, and we've concluded that we can safely fit 10 to 12 people and be safely social distanced. We're purchasing a fogger, which we learned about from another congregation in the Southeastern Synod, and which people will use to clean the pavilion appropriately after they use it. So while the rest of the buildings on campus remain closed, the council just approved the use of the pavilion with the appropriate cleaning and social distancing protocols. So I did want to share with you that in the very near future, small groups will be able to use the pavilion to continue to meet in and continue to build on another option for connections. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Pastor Dave.
Thanks, Dan, for that excellent work in monitoring these criteria that are very important for all of us. We appreciate it. So, let's assume for a minute that the criteria that Dan has shared have been met. And we can come back to sanctuary worship, something all of us want, and something, to be honest, none of us know when. What would it look like? First of all, let me use again that word options. Given the uncertainty of COVID-19 and its future with us, even when we can safely offer sanctuary worship, we will also continue to offer other worship options for those of us who do not feel comfortable returning to an inside worship experience. And if the current safety protocols are still in effect, that will change how we can do inside worship. Returning immediately to how we used to worship pre-COVID-19 may not be possible. As Dan suggested, social distancing may still be in effect, limiting our numbers to 50 people per service. Wearing masks may still be a requirement, as we respect the safety and well-being of both the worship leaders and the congregation. Singing may not be possible because it presents a greater risk of spreading the disease. Cleaning the sanctuary between each service may still be a requirement to better ensure the well-being of all worshipers. Reservations to come to worship may also be needed to make sure we have the appropriate seating capacity to safely accommodate those in attendance. I know. We are all getting sick and tired of all these different criteria and requirements. I know They are inconvenient. But ladies and gentlemen, inconvenience pales in comparison to the sickness and death that far too many of our sisters and brothers have experienced these past 7 months. And I believe it is God's call to each of us to do everything we can to mitigate against the risk of this disease and to protect ourselves and each other from its tragic consequences. So thank you for joining us for this video. Thank you for your continuing commitment and connection to the ministries of LCR. Take good care of yourselves and each other, and know that God is joining all of us in that effort.